Hello, good evening, and welcome to our second evening Wonder event. Wonder if agnosticism is the best bet. It is great to have you here. I'm joined by Toby Mills.
Hello.
And yeah, we're going to be your host for this evening. Toby, do you want to introduce our question?
Today we've got a little audience participation going on. There's a little, should be a link in the comments or description for you to click. And we are asking, is there anything that people have very strong opinions on that you just don't care about? And Caleb, is there anything that you don't care about that other people have strong opinions of?
I think I'd have to say football because all of my brothers, I've got four brothers, and all of them just love football. For some reason, they love Liverpool, even though we were brought up in Southampton. I don't quite understand that. But I just didn't get the football gene, I think. It's just not something I really care about. But I understand other people do. What about you? Is there anything you don't care about?
I'd have to say Marmite. You know, its whole thing is
Mm,
like either you love it or you hate it. But I'm just a bit indifferent. I don't actively go out and seek Marmite, but if I'm offered Marmite, I might have a cheeky bit of Marmite. Um,
interesting.
yeah,
Indifferent to Marmite. That's crazy.
yeah, I'm a rare breed. Yeah.
Well, we're joined tonight by our speaker, Andrew, again. Hi, Andrew. It's great to have you back.
Hi, Caleb.
Now, I know the girls asked you a couple of questions last night, kind of would you rather questions to see what, to kind of get to know who you are a bit. But we kind of wanted to find out a little bit more about you for those of you perhaps who weren't here last night or who just, feel like they don't really know you that well. So yeah, Toby's going to kick us off with a couple of questions.
Yeah. So, first off, Andrew, what is your favorite TV show and why?
At the moment, Better Call Saul, which is just the best TV ever. Why do I like it? It's just really quirky. So you'll have a sort of 3 minute shot of somebody dissolving a sugar cube taken from a really weird angle. So I kind of like that arty bit of it. The characters are absolutely fantastic. And my favorite is Mike, if you watch it. And the storylines, you literally have no idea what's going to happen next at any point because they're really unexpected. So I've only got as far as season 3, and so if anyone puts in the chat what happens next, I'll be really upset with you. But I'm enjoying it.
Oh, interesting. Have you heard of that, Toby? Better Call Saul?
I have. Is it a Breaking Bad spin-off?
Yeah, it's a prequel to Breaking Bad's on Netflix.
I'm yet to watch either show, but definitely on my list for the future.
Oh, exciting. Well, up next is what's your go-to breakfast cereal? You can tell a lot about a man about by what he eats for breakfast. So, an important question, this one.
Oh, he's come prepared.
Nice.
The
Nice.
bite-sized version. The big ones are a pain to eat, but perfect.
Mm.
I'm more of a Shreddies man myself, but
Each his own.
still pretty solid. A nice simple one now. What is your favorite color?
This actually is not a simple one. My best friends, who I'm in a bubble with, have just been repainting their house, and it turns out what is your favorite color is a really really difficult question and a very taxing question for a marriage. But they finally settled on one. Mine, I think blue, but I wouldn't paint my walls blue because it makes it look like I live in Cornwall, but which I don't. But in some contexts, blue is my favorite.
Mm. I think I'd have to go for green. Toby, do you? I mean, I'd take it red because you're wearing almost all red today.
You think so, but it's actually purple.
Ooh,
Yeah, I just like to look at it.
interesting. Mm. Well, next one is a little bit more topical, and it's who's your favorite New Testament Bible character and why? And I'm going to say you can't choose Jesus because, by all accounts, he's kind of the
I thought
best.
that was the obvious answer. Now I've got to think on my feet now.
Ah.
Um, Gosh, I don't know. I was prepared with Jesus.
Ah.
Maybe Peter, who's one of Jesus' first followers, who is very flawed. So he's not Peter the hero. He's Peter who. I mean, if you read this, I'm not going to tell you what. Part of my aim of this week is that I want to intrigue people to read for themselves. So I won't tell you what happens to him, but he messes up in quite a big way.
It's a rock solid choice, that one.
A rock solid choice.
Mhm.
It's funny because the name Peter means rock. If you learn nothing else from tonight, there's some trivia for you.
Okay, up next, another thing a lot of people have opinions on. Okay, when you go to hang up your toilet roll, do you hang it over like that, or do you hang it under, so you're kind of like pulling under?
Under.
Under. Ooh.
Ooh.
Do you have any pets?
Because then you can break off a sheet of it one-handed, can't you? Press it against the wall. And...
Yeah, again.
Interesting.
I know some people do it under because otherwise, if you've got a cat, if they do that,
Yeah.
it just spins around. But if it's over, then it will all fall down.
That's clever.
Fortunately, I don't have a cat, but that other reasons.
Well, I think we've got time for maybe 2 more questions. And actually, the next question is: are you a cat person or a dog person? And or do you not care?
I do care, and if you can, there he is.
Aww. How cute.
Sleeping.
Toby, do you want to go for one more question?
Well, in light of my my choice of thing that I don't care about, yes or no to Marmite, or are you in the middle like me? Cool.
Oh my gosh.
I think that might be a yes.
Yeah, that's fairly.
I cannot understand how you could be on the fence on such an important question, Toby.
It's all right, yeah.
Well, we've had plenty of responses to our Slido poll about things that people are indifferent about that lots of people have an opinion on. Lots of people are talking about scones and the pronunciation of the word scone. Andrew, do you have a way you pronounce scone or a reason why you think it should be one or the other?
I say scone. I'm not. Yeah, I think scone sounds a bit too posh, and I used to live in the north, and I don't think they'd be having any of it out there.
Yeah, we've got a scone full house here.
Yeah, I think all my family say scone, but I haven't really heard them say it, so who knows? It's been a while since we've made any. Pineapple on pizza, another food-related interesting answer. Any of you have strong opinions on pineapple on pizza?
I'm firmly against it. I won't lie to you. I've worked on a pizza van, and the guy who runs it is Italian, and he actually like charges way more than he should for the Hawaiian, just purely because he despises making Hawaiian pizzas that much.
Wow. Someone's answered supermarkets, so I'm not sure quite what that means. Whether do most people have a strong opinion about supermarkets?
Maybe choice of supermarket, perhaps. Yeah, Aldi or Tesco. That's the big question if you're a Warwick student.
Yeah. And beans on Weetabix as well is another one that someone's put in. I mean, Andrew, I know you're a shredded wheat person, but what do you think about beans on Weetabix?
Like, as in baked beans on Weetabix?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I've quite come to terms with that concept yet. That would require some...
All right, you can not answer. That's fine. We'll withhold judgment on that one. Well, it's almost time for us to get started. But if you have any more pertinent questions to the topic that you'd like to ask Andrew, you can use the link in the video description or in the Facebook Watch Party chat to ask anonymous questions to Andrew, which we'll answer either at the end or at the Zoom Watch Party after Zoom Cafe after this event.
Yeah, and so without any further ado, I'll let Andrew get on with it.
Thanks very much, guys. Thank you for tuning in this evening. And we're looking at the question of whether agnosticism is the safest bet. And there's a joke doing the rounds at the moment that says that people in our society are becoming more religious. Most of them are nuns, because when you ask them what religious beliefs they hold, they say none. I'm sorry, it's a poor joke, but that is true, isn't it, of our culture? It's not that we're hostile to Christianity, and it might be you've come along tonight to humour a Christian friend, in which case, thanks so much for giving up your time. It's not that you're hostile to it, but neither do you want to be too serious about it or too extreme about it, because you're wary of extremes of religious beliefs. You know, creeds, when they're taken to the extreme, they result in wars and conflicts. And you prefer to identify as a humble agnostic. I mean, you're just not sure. You're not saying anyone's totally wrong, but you're not sure that anyone's 100% right. And that's quite a popular position nowadays. So Wikipedia's got a list of agnostics page that I looked at, and lots of people you'd know. The authors Franz Kafka or Matt Groening of The Simpsons fame, the tycoons Elon Musk and Warren Buffett, the actors Leonardo DiCaprio, Charlie Chaplin, the philosophers Noam Chomsky and David Hume, the scientists Marie Curie and Charles Darwin, all identified themselves as agnostics. The comedian Marcus Brigstocke puts it really well, I think. Here's a quote from him. "The truth, as I see it, is that I'd rather stay in a place of confusion amongst similar restless souls shuffling about in the hope that there might be a sign pointing one direction or the other, than leap aboard whichever bandwagon looks like it's got some momentum behind it and a confident driver. We might find God. We should probably have a plan for that in case we startle him and he goes for us. I don't mind if we don't find him. I'd be just as happy to discover that whatever road this is that I'm on, I'm not walking it alone." Maybe identify with that. I mean, you're open-minded enough to come to this evening online, and yet you're not sure, and you don't want to throw yourself into it. What is agnosticism anyway? The word just comes from the ancient Greek word gnosis, meaning knowledge, and the A at the start of the word just means not. So we say something's atypical when it's not typical, or asymmetrical when it's not symmetrical, and you could call a vegetarian an a-carnivore, or someone who doesn't like bagpipes a-Scottish. If gnosis is about knowing, then agnosticism simply means not knowing. It just means I don't know. But I think it can be helpful to distinguish three different kinds of agnosticism. So the first one is where something is knowable, but you yourself don't know it. So, for example, I could say I'm agnostic about the neurological basis of ventriloquism, whether the brain mechanisms that determine a sound's location might be influenced by visual cues. I actually used to know quite a lot about that when I did my doctorate in auditory neuroscience 20 years ago. I read a really fascinating paper in it published in 1994, but I haven't really kept up with the topic. You know, I don't know what's been done similarly. So I'm agnostic, but it would be possible to know. I just have to go to a library and catch up. Similarly, I'm agnostic about how many helium balloons it would take for my mum to fly. But it would be possible to know. It's a fairly simple experiment, actually, but given my mum's afraid of heights, it wouldn't be very kind to find out. So I'm agnostic because I haven't found out yet, but I could find out. And it might be that you're agnostic about Jesus in that sense. You realise it would be possible to reach some conclusions about him, but you just haven't looked into it sufficiently. And if that's you, I really encourage you to do that. And that's partly what this week is about. And I'd love to convince you to just do some investigating. But there's another kind of agnosticism that is a bit sort of firmer or a bit more entrenched. And for them, it's not so much I don't know as I can't know. Agnosticism is a kind of philosophical conviction. But wait a minute, because there's a bit of an awkward irony here. Don't know if you noticed that this kind of agnostic isn't actually very agnostic about their agnosticism. To paraphrase, they're really saying, I know that you can't know. And I want to say, well, how do you know? How are you so sure that you can't be sure? I mean, saying, I know there is no compelling evidence for God is a bit like saying, I know there is no treasure hidden in Leicestershire. I mean, how could you know that? You'd have to have first dug everywhere. What if there was a gold ingot deep beneath an inconspicuous cabbage field, or a stolen diamond necklace inside the detergent bottle at a postcode that the police didn't check? I mean, it turns out that the University of Leicester Archaeological Services, who, let's face it, do more digging than the rest of us, didn't even know until recently that Richard III was buried under their local council car park. I mean, to be sure that you can't know something is tantamount to a claim to know everything. You'd have to know all history. You'd have to have bottomed out every philosophical question. You'd have to have explored every scientific avenue. And you haven't. So you can't be dogmatically agnostic. What if there's some evidence that you haven't considered that is convincing? So there's two kinds. We've had, I don't know because I haven't checked, but I could check. We've had, there's no point in checking because I definitely wouldn't be able to find out, which is just, to be honest, an absurd position. And then there's the third one. And I think actually this is probably where most people are, if they're honest. It's not so much I don't know or I can't know as I don't want to know, please leave me alone. So agnosticism isn't so much a position as a strategy or a defense to stop you being cornered by an annoying Christian. And maybe you that's why you're here tonight, as a sort of way of humoring them. It reminds me of an unforgettable lecture I had when I was training to be a vicar at college by my late professor. He walked to the lectern with a twinkle in his eye and announced mischievously, "The world is flat, convince me otherwise." And then he folded his arms and waited. "It looks round from space," says somebody. It was just the first answer, which I thought was excellent. And he just batted it away. "Oh, NASA faked the photographs." Another student in our class who actually had a PhD in physics prior to training to be a vicar said something about the magnetic field. And he said, "Oh, you're just trying to blind me with science. How could I possibly check that?" And it went on like this. You know, people had really good arguments to why the world is not flat. But he just, whatever they said, he just would bat it away. He'd find some reason to dismiss it, even if the reason was stupid. And then at one point, somebody just lost their temper and said, "Look, it doesn't matter what we say. You're just finding some ridiculous reason not to listen." And a broad smile spread across his face. And he said, "Today's lecture is on skepticism. Shall we begin?" And actually, the skeptic's aim is not to arrive at the truth, but to avoid arriving at the truth. It's actually a strategy to say, "I don't know," because it kind of keeps everything at arm's length. It's like a kind of philosophical handbrake to avoid being budged from the comfort of the status quo. And you'd think that sitting on the fence would be uncomfortable, and I guess it is, but with a bit of DIY and some memory foam, it can be quite bearable. And it certainly seems preferable to the half-glimpsed horrors of what might lie on the other side. I mentioned this yesterday, but I think a lot of people do fear that Christianity is out to wreck your life. Yeah, that God wants to spoil my fun, limit my choices. If Christianity had a colour, it would be grey. If you could sum up the Christian ethic in one word, it would be don't. Being a Christian means ill-advised fashion choices, socks and sandals. A wine cellar stocked only with Schlur, Christian champagne. And substituting your favourite Netflix thriller for back-to-back repeats of songs of praise on VHS. That's a caricature, isn't it, of Christianity in our culture. It's why in 2008, the British Humanist Association raised over £150,000 to run an ad campaign on the side of buses, proclaiming, "There's probably no God. Now stop worrying and enjoy your life." The implication was, if there was a God, it would make you anxious and miserable. And I want to say loudly, I don't think that is true about God or about Jesus. I don't think he is anti-life and anti-fun. And if you've received that kind of impression, I don't blame you for trying to keep the whole thing at arm's length. And I don't know how to persuade you just in the short time I've got, but maybe the best thing is to say, think of the Christian friend who invited you. And there'll be things about them you find annoying probably, and things about them you don't envy. But I challenge you that following Jesus has not wrecked their life, or made them tedious or anti-joy. And I just don't think you need to be that scared of the question. If it turns out it's true, it won't be a disaster. So I want to take a passage from the Bible, like as I did yesterday, as a sort of basis for our investigation. And I've got 3 things to say. I'm going to read it first, and then I'll make 3 observations. So this is from a letter written by one of Jesus' closest friends, a guy called John. We looked at some of what he wrote yesterday, and it's a letter he wrote to some other Christians in the 1st century. It's written in Greek originally. It's been translated into English, and here's a little excerpt from it. That which was from the beginning, which we've heard, which we've seen with our eyes, which we've looked upon and have touched with our hands concerning the word of life. The life was manifest, and we've seen it and testified to it and proclaimed to you the eternal life which was with the Father and was made manifest to us. That which we've seen and heard, we proclaim also to you, so that you may have fellowship with us. Indeed, our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ, and we're writing these things to make our joy complete. This is the message we've heard from him and proclaimed to you. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. If we say we have fellowship with him, but we walk in the darkness, we lie and don't practice the truth. But if we walk in the light as he's in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his Son, cleanses us from all sin. Okay, I'm just going to look at that again, and I'll go through some bits of it. The first thing to say, I think this is a very remarkable letter. I don't know if you've heard a 1st century letter before. Obviously, the style's a bit different to nowadays. It's quite old. But it is very remarkable, I think, because it combines 2 kinds of literature that are quite everyday that never go together. So on the one hand, it's normal for people to philosophize. I certainly used to do a lot of that at university, sitting up late at night talking about things. That's normal. In fact, I quite like going to art galleries. Not at the moment, but when lockdown eases, I'm looking forward to that. My favourite gallery is called the White Cube in Bermondsey. A couple of years ago, they hosted an exhibition of 350 paintings by Peter Dreyer, the celebrated German artist. Each measured 10 by 8 inches. Each depicted the very same glass of water. He's painted the same glass of water every day almost since 1974. It's crazy. So you go to the gallery and there's just hundreds of pictures, 350 of them. He's got even more than that, but in the exhibition, 350 of the same glass of water. And then you read the notes about it written by some art historian, and they tell you things like Dreyer's studies of matter, light and time demonstrate an artist's meditative focus can reveal great fullness even in an empty glass. And that the work was as much a routine of coping and healing, he lived through the aftermath of World War II, as an exploration of artistic conventions. That sort of stuff, whether you take it seriously, whether you think it's a bit of guff, but you go to any modern art gallery, you can find people philosophizing, and they're talking about things like light and truth and what is humanity, and the nature of time. The people discuss that kind of stuff. That's normal. Meanwhile, my stepbrother works in a concert hall in Essex, and just before lockdown, his Facebook said that he had gone for a pint at the Stag and Lantern, a micropub in Hyams Park in northeast London. And that is pretty normal. Every day over 1 billion people log into Facebook, and lots of them upload descriptions of what they've been up to and where they've gone. Telling people what happened in your day is normal. Okay, so philosophy, that's normal. This happened to me today. I went to a microbrewery. That's normal. But they don't ever go together. So you wouldn't say, last night I met eternity in a micropub. Or, you'll never guess who walked into the office on Monday afternoon, the beginning of the universe. Okay, that is a very strange thing to say. To combine the philosophy stuff with the "this happened to me today" stuff. But that's what's going on in this remarkable letter, because John is describing eternity as a person who he's met. I'll read again that opening sentence. That which was from the beginning. What's the beginning of life? What's the origin of the universe? Yeah, well, the beginning of everything, which we saw with our eyes, which we looked upon and touched with our hands. The life, the essence of what it means to be alive. We've seen it. We can tell you about it. We can tell you about the eternal life that we saw and heard. He's talking about Jesus, of course. And Jesus was somebody he knew really well. I mean, he'd been on fishing trips with him. He'd shared meals with him. He'd traveled the length and breadth of Israel with him. And yet he was convinced that Jesus was the eternal life, the one who existed from the beginning. He was sure that he'd met God. Now, that's quite a testimony. And it immediately means that, well, I guess if it's true, it takes us out of the realm of the unknowably philosophical. How do you know the ultimate nature of quantum reality? Or, you can try and look into it. Or how do you speculate around how life started? You can guess. But if I said to Thomas, my stepbrother, "Are you sure you went to the Stag and Lantern?" He'd go, "Yeah, of course I am. Like, I went there. I go there often." There are things that happen to you in your day you're pretty sure about. So are you sure that I ate some Marmite on Zoom this evening? I mean, I guess you could, if you're really skeptical, you could say maybe he faked it, and there was something else in the jar or whatever. But things that happen to you today, you're sure about. It's not, sometimes people ask me when I talk about Jesus, I say I trust in him. And they say, how sure are you? You sort of 20% sure or 60% sure? I mean, John, he's 100% sure. Because there was a guy that he knew really, really well that he spent 3 years with. So the philosophical questions for John are things that happened in my life questions. It's such an obvious thing, isn't it? But I'd never realized this about Christianity. I'd never thought, this is historical. And if it's historical, then it's checkable. It's not just a matter of opinion. Historical things are true or false things. The Battle of Hastings. I don't know much about history because I studied science at school mainly, and I've just been playing catch up on history. But I do know the Battle of Hastings, 1066. And if your friend says, "Oh, I prefer to think of the Battle of Hastings as happening in 1266, they're just wrong. Or if you say, "Oh, I think the Battle of Hastings was between the English and the Italians," it just wasn't. Something happened in 1066 or near Hastings, and it was some French people or some Normans who turned up and beat the English king. History is true or false. It's A or B. And I know, historians will say, well, there's some things in history we're not sure about. Well, yeah, sure. But the events themselves can't be both. It's one of the reasons why I reject the idea that all religions are the same. All religions can be true for you, because one of us is wrong. At least one of us is wrong. I mean, so for example, I've got some good Muslim friends, but Muslim friends of mine, they believe that Jesus was a prophet. They don't accept that he was God. And importantly, they do not believe that Jesus died on a cross. They say God would never allow his prophet to die such a horrible death. And they have a theory that Jesus was mistaken for one of his followers, and it was a case of mistaken identity, and they killed the wrong person. But Jesus himself didn't die. All Muslims think that. The Quran says that Jesus was not crucified. Whereas in the Bible, the crucifixion of Jesus is absolutely central, as we'll see in a minute. Now, one thing that's obvious to me is that they are not both true. I mean, Jesus either died or he didn't die, but definitely not both. See, historical things are are checkable things. They're investigatable things. And John is saying, the author of this letter, I was there and I saw it and I heard it and I touched it. And there's a little story that I'm pretty sure he's alluding to here. He says, which we've seen with our eyes, which we've looked upon and touched with our hands. I think he's alluding to the incident where Jesus came back from the dead, he says, and many of Jesus' followers saw him alive, and Jesus met them and they spoke with him, and they all reported it to each other. We've seen Jesus, he's back. He died 3 days ago, but he's alive now. And there's a guy called Thomas that you might have heard of, and he's often called Doubting Thomas. And I want to call him, for the purposes of this evening, Skeptic Thomas or Agnostic Thomas. Thomas says, I can't believe that Jesus is alive again unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails and place my finger into his side. Now, this is it's kind of slightly grotesque, but it's a very good bit of evidence, because Jesus was killed by crucifixion, right? So the Romans used to nail you through the wrists to a crossbeam, a bit of wood. And then we're told that Jesus died quickly. He died early. And the circumstances of it were that Jesus died on a Friday, which is the day before the Jewish Sabbath. So the Jewish holy day starts on a Saturday. It starts at nightfall on a Friday and goes all the way through into Saturday. And the people who were killing Jesus, they didn't want the bodies around on the holy day to be still on the cross. Now, I think this is very telling, because it's just the worst kind of religious hypocrisy, isn't it? We don't mind murdering somebody, but we want to clean it all up so we can look religious tomorrow. And if you hate hypocrisy in religious people, you're in good company, because Jesus couldn't stand it. But this is a piece of rank hypocrisy. We'll murder him and then we'll clean it all up. So they need Jesus to die in a hurry, and they try to hasten the deaths of some of the people dying there. But we're told that Jesus, just to check he was dead, the soldier spears him in the side, and his side is ruptured, and out comes blood and water. So Jesus dies by crucifixion, so nails in the wrist, and they check he's dead with a spear in the side. And Thomas says, I'm not willing to accept that there was a resurrection unless I see and check the nail marks and the space in his side where the spear was. Now, this is very good evidence, right? Because if you touch somebody, it's normally possible to tell whether they're alive. You can try that with a family member after this call. I mean, you can tell the difference between a corpse and a live person. Actually, I had this very experience just before Christmas. There was somebody collapsed in my street when it was on the day that it was -3, and they're just lying on the pavement. I was really scared, and I thought, are they conscious? And I test their breathing, whatever. It turns out they were just very drunk, and you can tell whether someone's alive by touching them. But by touching his arm, his hand wounds, Thomas is saying, I don't only want to know that someone's alive, but I want to know that the person who's alive is the same as the person who was dead. It's a very, very good bit of evidence. And unless I see that, I'm not willing to accept it. And then he gets to do the examination that he asked for. Jesus meets him. He puts his hand in his side. In fact, there's a fantastic painting. If you're into art, I know lots of Warwick people are maths students. That is harsh, isn't it? Because I was a science student and I like art, so maybe mathematicians like art as well. But Caravaggio did this amazing painting called The Incredulity of St. Thomas, and it's worth looking up on the internet. And it's really gruesome, and it's a picture of his doing the examination on Jesus. Caravaggio, The Incredulity of St. Thomas. And he concludes, Jesus is alive again. And you say, well, how sure are you? 80% sure? No, I'm very sure, because I was there, right? Unless you got some sort of advanced amnesia, you are sure about some of the people that you met today. And that's how sure Thomas was, because it's not just a philosophical question, you see. It's not just, what's the nature of the universe, or what's life about, or it's about something that happened to him, about someone that he met, and his friends met and they hung around with and they watched be brutally executed by crucifixion, and his tomb they found empty, and then who they saw and touched. So the truth is a person. The eternal became historical. The eternal life was someone that you could meet in a micropub in Hymes Park. Now, would it be reasonable at that point for John or Thomas to remain agnostic? Would that be reasonable? I sometimes give the stupid analogy of, and this doesn't really work quite as well on Zoom, so you have to imagine that I'm actually in Warwick and you're in Warwick as well. But if I was doing this talk actually in Warwick before you physically, I would say maybe yesterday you were agnostic about the existence of Andrew Sach. This is my name. I heard there's this guy called Andrew Sach. You know, he's dashingly handsome and has a very efficient haircut that quick drying in the rain, and he's about 6'2" and so on. Wears glasses. And he said, "Oh, I'm not sure. I've heard that theory, but I don't know if it's just made up." That's fair enough. You know, there's rumours. But then, having met me, it would be a bit ridiculous to then say, "Oh, I'm not sure. I mean, he might exist." See, and that is how sure John is, because he's met him. I'm labelling the point now. So the truth is a person. There's no need to be agnostic. But secondly, the person is the truth is a person who brings you joy. John doesn't sound so I've got terrible news for you. It's a bit of a drag, but it turns out there is a God after all. Bad luck. No, he is really, really excited about it. It turns out his life has a meaning. It turns out his future has a hope. It turns out that somebody who made the universe, he loves us, and who he has got to know personally. And he says, we're writing these things to make our joy complete. You know, we're so happy about it, we just had to tell you as well. So you don't need to keep it at arm's length out of a fear that it would. Now, maybe you're skeptical about that, and I was. In my own case, when I was at university in my first year, I basically discovered that Christianity was true quite a long time before I wanted it to be true. So I was hiding from it really, and I used to avoid Christians because I thought, I think they're right, but I really don't want them to be right. And the slowest thing for me was to not just be convinced that Jesus was true, but that Jesus was also good. I now think he's true and good, and I don't think he'll destroy your life. Second thing. And then thirdly, and more briefly, the truth is about a great danger and a wonderful solution. It's not safe to be agnostic. So the first point, the truth is a historical person. You don't need to be agnostic. Secondly, the truth about that person is good news. But thirdly, it's not safe to be agnostic because the truth is about a great danger and a wonderful solution. And this is how John goes on. He says, this is the message we've heard from him and proclaim to you, that God is light and in him is no darkness at all. That is the Christian message in 11 words. God is light and in him is no darkness at all. Is that right? Caleb is counting on his fingers. Is that 11? You can tell me if it's not. Yes. Light in the Bible, it speaks of goodness, and there is no evil in God. He is only good. Or light sometimes speaks of truth, and there is no lies in God. He is only true. He's true and he's good. But we're mixed. It's not that I'm all darkness. That would be quite funny, wouldn't it? You know, I'm the master of darkness. I'm not all darkness, but there are some dark corners of my life that I don't particularly want you peering into. And I'm sure that's true of you as well. I'm not pure evil, but there are some evil things that I've done and thought and said. Things that have hurt people. Things I'd be ashamed of if you knew them. I'm not totally transparent. There's things that I've lied about, and I think you're the same. But God's not like that. God is only light and only true. And the problem is that when we come face to face with God, the contrast just really shows us up. I used to, in my old house in East London, I had one of those early, quote unquote, energy saver light bulbs. I mean, the way that they saved energy was by not producing any light. But they would, you turn on the bathroom light and it would be a dim glow that you could just about find your way to the sink. And then, they very, very slowly get brighter. So after about 10 minutes, you could see your nose. I looked fantastic in that lighting. And I can't understand why celebrities with large budgets would fit their bathrooms with LED lights all over the ceiling, so you can see everything. Those kind of mirrors with, you can see every blackhead, every wrinkle. Why would you want to do that? Just stay with the dim lighting and light yourself, or just take selfies. Because the great thing is now that iPhones and everything have all these algorithms built in so that they make you look nicer than you actually look. And if you convince yourself that you'll say, "Oh, I look quite good," yeah, you do, because that's the algorithm. That isn't what you look like to anyone else. Why not hide? But when you come before God, the light shows you up. It's one of the reasons that people found Jesus very unsettling. Jesus was good. He was true. He was compassionate. People really found him difficult company. He had this awkward habit of pointing out when people were being hypocritical and calling people out for things. People don't like that very much. Jesus' light makes our darkness show up, and that is a problem, the Bible says. If we claim that we're friends with God while we walk in the darkness, we're lying. But if we come into the light as His in the light, then we can have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, His Son, cleanses us from all sin. I'm going to talk more about Jesus' death, or what's called here His blood, tomorrow, and I'd love you to come back to hear about Jesus' death on the cross and why it's so central to that. But suffice it to say tonight that Jesus says that His death is crucial to solving the problem of our darkness and God's light, because the two are not compatible. If you want to walk down the sunny side of the street and I want to walk in the shadows, which I do because I get sunburnt easily for obvious reasons, we can't walk together. And if God is in the light and I'm in the darkness, we can't be friends. There is a problem. And actually, we're headed for a collision course, because in the end, if you got some darkness and you turn the light on, the darkness is destroyed. And one day we face God's judgment day, and in the darkness we will be destroyed. We desperately need the solution that Jesus holds out through His death on the cross. Now, that means that the truth is it's a life or death thing, and agnosticism is not safe. Let me give you a little sort of parable just to close of this. Imagine you're a chess enthusiast, which I'm a little bit, and you're moving King's Bishop to D4, the Roy Lopez, I can't say it, but the Roy Lopez. You've researched the opening 10 moves deep, you're pretty confident of a checkmate. You're so focused on the board that you're unaware of everything else that's happening to you. Rook to D7, check. Your opponent resigns. You shift back in your chair. You can only see the chessboard. Everything else is a blur. You reach out to shake your opponent's hand, and you see his outstretched palm, but his elbow disappears into the fog. His face is hidden. Oh gosh, I really need an early night, you think. 4 days working a chess game is a bit too much for me. On the drive home, your peripheral vision is normal, but when you get back to your house, you drop your keys and you spend ages trying to find them. The next morning, you can see them easily, but the bottle of semi-skimmed has vanished completely from view, though it turns out only to be inches away. You text your boss, you queue for an emergency GP appointment, she makes an urgent referral. Next thing you know, you're trying to keep still as your body is slowly enveloped by the buzzing tunnel of the MRI machine. As you emerge, the radiographer's face is inscrutable. It's a pituitary gland tumour, says Mr. Owosu, the consultant oncologist, later that afternoon. I recommend endoscopic transnasal transphenoidal surgery. In plain English, that means we put a tiny tube up your nose and cut away the tumour, then a course of radiotherapy. If we act immediately, you should make a full recovery. On the bus home, you realise you can see out of your corner of your eye without any difficulty. Specifically, you can read the title of a book your fellow passenger is reading. The Health Conspiracy: How Doctors, the Drug Industry and the Government Undermine Our Health. The next day you feel great. In your lunch hour you win 2 games consecutively on leechess.org. Your rating goes up to 1424. How do I look, you ask your colleague. I've been feeling a bit under the weather recently. You look fine, he says. You don't know if you can trust Dr. Owosu, and you're having doubts about his diagnosis, not least because the prospects of his colleagues deploying a robotic knife up your nostrils is singularly unappealing. It's time for a second opinion. At the Warwick Alternative and Holistic Medicine Centre, you meet Miss Foxglove, who, to the accompaniment of soothing whale noises, reassures you that everything's okay, though a course of echinacea could help unblock your sinuses. Echinacea by mouth to clear the nose, or a robot up the nose to clear the head? Which to choose? A month later, you missed your follow-up appointment with Mr. Owosu because of the traffic. And you didn't reschedule yet because it's a busy time with the end of year exams, but you promised that you will. The headaches are bad sometimes, but not always, and Holland and Barrett are doing 2 for 1 on echinacea. You probably see where this is going, right, this little parable. Because this is a bit of news that isn't safe to be agnostic about. You basically got 3 options. You can put your faith in Mr. Owosu, face the surgery, endure the subsequent radiotherapy. Or you can reject Mr. Owosu as a medical fraud, dispense the headaches and take echinacea tablets. Or you can be agnostic. You can delay hospital appointments. You can reserve judgment. But you see, options 2 and 3 are actually the same, functionally. I mean, failing to decide means the decision's is made for you. And the question is that a fair analogy? I mean, we could tell another story in which the topic you're agnostic about is whether Marmite is good or bad. I mean, frankly, who cares? Not all indecision is life-threatening. So is the Bible's message more like taste preferences or a medical emergency? Well, Jesus says it's a medical emergency. All of us are dabbling in the darkness. All of us one day will die. All of us one day will face the God who made us, and we won't be ready for that day. And when his light shines really brightly, we will have nowhere to hide. And yet Jesus has a solution by his blood, by his death on the cross. That's his claim. Jesus says, without my solution, you're going to hell. But with my solution, you can have eternal life. That's how he puts it. I'm sorry if that's offensive, but that's how Jesus puts it. And to be, I don't know about that is not safe, right? Because if Jesus is lying, then you can reject it and you're fine. But if Jesus is true, if Jesus is right, then you're in enormous danger and you need his solution. And if you just remain undecided, that is just functionally the same as rejecting it. You know, the chemotherapy won't do itself. You wait at home delaying appointments, you're on the fence. You might as well have just thrown the whole thing away. And I always plead with you tonight, please don't do the easy sort of cowardly thing and just shelve this stuff. I don't really want to talk about it. It's kind of uncomfortable, so I'm just going to put it in the tray marked pending indefinitely. Because life just will get busy. I know at the moment we have nothing to do, or certainly nothing, we have no social life. But that won't last for that long. You know, before long, we'll be frantically busy again. And you'll be busy with exams, and you'll be busy with job interviews. You'll be busy with your first job, your first relationship, your first kids. You know, life will keep you busy. But be careful of just shelving a really important question. And so I want to ask you, well, will you at least take the first step of resolving to find out more about this? That's what you do, isn't it? If you got a medical diagnosis and you weren't quite sure about it, you would devote yourself to finding out. You go to see other doctors, you do some reading, you learn a lot about biology, you check the medical details again yourself, but you wouldn't just go, oh, I don't know, really, I'm not really sure, I'll think about it later. It's an urgent enough question that you should find out. So just in summary, what kind of agnostic are you? I don't know because I haven't looked into it. Well, we'll find out if that's you. Find out. Resolve to stop being agnostic. Number 2, you can't know. Now that's just absurd. How could you possibly say that without having been investigating everything? Number 3, yeah, I'm basically just trying to avoid it. Well, that's honest of you if you say that, and that certainly was true of me. And I want to say, don't avoid it. It's not terrible news. It's really good news. And then 3 quick points. The truth is a person. There's no need to be agnostic. You can be sure about history. Number 2, the truth is good news. Number 3, the truth is about a real problem that we've got and a great solution to it, but it's not safe to sit on the fence. Thanks for listening. If you're still here, I don't know. The other day I made a little video for our church, and you can look at the Facebook stats and you go, oh wow, we had 1,000 views, and then you look at the detailed analytics and it tells you how long people actually watched for, and you say, oh wow, 1,000 people watched for 15 seconds, and then there's like 3 people there at the end. So if you stuck out the whole thing, then thanks so much for your time and your attention. I'd love to answer questions if you've got any. Otherwise, I'd love to see you again tomorrow. We're looking at the question of wonder why Jesus chose to die.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. I really love that insight into John's letter, and a really important message at the end there. If you want to discuss things, anything that Andrew has said in that talk with him face to face or screen to screen, there's going to be a Zoom cafe immediately after this, I believe, and you can access that through the Warwick CU Microsoft Teams, and the link to that Teams is on warwickcu.org/wonder. That's warwickcu.org/wonder. So be sure to check that out.
Awesome, yeah. And we've got plenty more events on this week to challenge you some more. Tomorrow, there's a lunchtime talk on artificial intelligence and human uniqueness, which promises to be really interesting. There's a lunch bar answering the question, what is the church? Dick Dowsett will be talking about death and life at 6 p.m. tomorrow. And Andrew will be back, as he mentioned, at 7 p.m. to share on why Jesus chose to die, which I'm sure is bound to be a fascinating talk. We'd love to see you come back and explore more about the Christian faith, and we've got 2 days packed full of events to help you do that.
And just before we sign off, we have had a couple of questions in the Google form. So first of all, we have a question. Theoretically, is everything knowable?
No, this is a trick question. So for all of you physicists, you're thinking about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, maybe, and the mathematicians are thinking about Gödel's incompleteness theorem. I mean, there are some things that we know that we can't know. I don't think those questions really apply to questions of history and God's existence. And if the only Heisenberg you know about is the badass anti-hero from Breaking Bad, then you don't have to worry about it either. Yeah, I mean, of course, there's some things we don't know. Probably some things we can't know. We're never going to see the far, 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 far corner of the universe because the light won't reach us for millions of years. So I mean, there's things that we don't know. I'm suggesting that God is knowable. Of course, you don't know if I'm right. Probably, if you're here as a skeptic, you don't know. But don't use. But basically, I'm saying I can't know is not a coherent position. You don't know whether you can know until you look into it, and I'm telling you, you can.
Right. Thanks for that
Thank you.
answer. And the other question, quite a broad one. What is the historical evidence for the Bible?
That is a broad question. I mean, it's a very, very important question, and I would love to speak for at least as long as I just have about it, but you probably don't want me to do that right now. It's a very sensible question, and of course you shouldn't. I mean, it's one that you need to answer. What can I say briefly? Very, very briefly. I think one thing I'd say was don't wait too long before actually reading it. So I remember one thing I did learn from history is that first-hand documents, primary documents, are better than secondary documents. So you could read loads and loads of books about whether you can trust the Bible, or you could read the Bible, and do both. But don't wait too long before you look at the primary texts. So there's a lot about you can tell just by opening it and having a look. What kind of literature is this? Is it written in a sort of fairy story way? By all means, read it skeptically, but just read it. My suggestion, often with friends, is, and I've been speaking tonight from John's writings and yesterday again from John's writings. John wrote a full biography of Jesus called John's Gospel. You can find it online, or your Christian friend will post you one. I'm sure the CE will post you one if you give them your address. It's probably easier to read a physical thing than an online thing. Why don't you read it? But rather than reading it super quickly, and the whole thing probably takes you 2 hours if you're an average speed reader. But rather than reading it quickly in 2 hours, why don't spend 1 hour just reading the first chapter slowly enough to actually think about what it's saying and engage with it? And I say to people, I give them one, physical one, and say, why don't you read it and annotate it? So anything you agree with, put a tick next to. Anything you disagree with, put a cross next to. Anything you don't understand, underline it. And then I'll buy you a coffee, which is going to be allowed quite soon, isn't it? Like 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be able to do that. I'll buy you a coffee, and then we'll go through your annotations. And it might be that I understand some bits you didn't understand, or it might be I don't. And anyway, just talk about it. And if that's interesting and useful, we'll do the same for chapter 2. And then chapter 3. The Christian's going to buy these coffees, or if they're on Zoom, I suppose that's not as much fun. But if you can meet them, they'll buy the coffees. And then that gives you 21 coffees maximum, because there's 21 chapters. But the point is that at whatever stage it stops being useful, you just stop. So all you got to lose is 1 hour of your life, 1 coffee, and 1 chapter. But potentially 21 chapters, 21 hours, 21 coffees, and you might be sure. But at least start. So don't just hold a whole thing off saying, I'm not sure whether I can trust it historically. Why not have a look at it and decide as you go whether you can trust it historically? But there's stuff I could say about why you should. So things like Jesus' followers were not rich because of what they wrote. They weren't popular because of what they wrote. It wasn't like, this was start religion and make your fortune. They were persecuted, they were threatened, some of them were killed, and they kept testifying to it. So why would they make it up? That's the question. Secondly, they get lots and lots of details right. So this isn't a long, long ago, far, far away story. And that's, various stories always start like that, don't they? Long, long ago, far, far away. This isn't long ago, far away. This is in Israel. And this is it's long ago now, but when it was first published, it wasn't long ago, within the lifetimes of the people who were around. And that is dangerous. If you're making up a story, you don't set it somewhere local and recent, because people could just check. If you're making up a story, don't make up a story about something that happened in Coventry last year in public, because people will be able to falsify it too easily. But one of the things you notice about the eyewitness documents of Jesus is they constantly mention where things happened and who the people were, which, again, now that's a long time ago, but when they were first published, the opponents of Christianity, of which there were many, it's so easily falsified. You said this happened in Capernaum. We'll just go to Capernaum. It's just a town in the north of Israel. Just ask people, ask around, stamp it out immediately. Jesus was crucified in Jerusalem. It's the capital city, for goodness sake, and it was at Passover, which is the main festival. You can't lie about stuff that everyone knows about, basically. So yeah, there's all sorts of things, but that was the beginning of an answer.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andrew, for your time. It's been amazing to hear what you have to say. Once again, do hop onto the Zoom cafe if you'd like to ask Andrew any more questions, or just have a chat about what you've heard today. Thanks so much for tuning in. We hope to see you throughout the rest of the week at our other events. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.